Welcome, everyone. I am so glad you're here. I'm Jen Fox, your certified high performance coach and CEO of And Fox High Performance Coaching. A few quick housekeeping items before we begin because we have a packed agenda. You're not going to be on camera today, so just settle in, be present, and take notes. The chat is open, so if something resonates, drop a thumbs up or applause or put something in the comments. And if you have questions, put them in the chat as well. Dave's monitoring it and can jump in. I know there's a lot of new faces today, so welcome. And to our regulars, thank you for being here again. Let's get started. I'm going to start with something that might be uncomfortable to hear. Your manager has forgotten most of your year. Yeah, forgotten most of your year. And that's not because they don't care about you and because your work didn't matter. It's because they're human. They've been managing multiple people, navigating competing priorities, and dealing with their own pressures over the past 12 months straight. So that initiative that you led in March that was fantastic, distant memory. I'm not saying this to discourage you. I'm saying this because it changes how you approach this entire process. And Dave, you're still on camera. I want to let you know that I spent 3 decades as a wealth management executive, reporting to CEOs, managing large teams, and sitting in the rooms where careers were discussed and decisions were made. I've been on both sides of this conversation literally hundreds of times. And now, as a coach, I work with professionals navigating this exact moment. Here's what I want you to know. You have contributed value this year. This year-end process is your opportunity to make sure that that value is clearly understood and also to get clarity on what you want next. You're not waiting on a verdict. You're actively shaping how your contributions are seen. And you're deciding whether this role is still serving you. And this is what I mean by influencing up. Because influence, it's not politics. It's not self-promotion. And it's definitely not gaming the system. Influencing up is clarity. It's ownership. It's being intentional about how you communicate your values, how you navigate important conversations, and how you advocate for what matters to you. Most people wait to be noticed. They think if I do something really well, people will see and they will know. They work hard and hope the right people figure it out. But influencing up means you're not leaving it to chance. In the next 40 minutes or so, I'm going to walk you through 4 key things. The first is a tool called the alignment audit, because while the organization is evaluating you, you should be evaluating it as well. Number 2, how to write a self-assessment that clearly communicates your impact. 3, how to understand what your manager is actually navigating behind the scenes. And 4, how to show up to the conversation itself, grounded, confident, and positioned for next year. Let's get into it. The first thing that I want to talk to you about is the alignment audit. As I mentioned, most people approach year-end asking one question. How am I performing for the organization? We ask that question because it's often asked of us, right? I want you to ask a different one. How is the organization performing for me? I know that this can feel uncomfortable at first. We are absolutely conditioned to focus on our output, our value, our contribution, how we're showing up. And that matters. We're going to get into that later. But it's really only half the equation. I know this is weird to think about, but you're in a relationship with your organization. You bring something to the table, they bring something to the table. And just like any relationship, it only works when both sides are holding up their end. So, to help you evaluate whether this relationship and this role are actually serving you, not just whether you're serving them, I developed a framework called the alignment audit. So, in a moment, we're going to walk through part of it together. So, if you don't already have something to write with, go ahead and grab a pen and paper now. So, when you step back and think about your experience at work, there are a few core aspects that shape how it feels to be in this role day to day. Your growth, your visibility, the leadership you're under, how you're compensated, and whether there's a path forward. I call each of these a dimension. So, in our full coaching work, there are 10 dimensions in the alignment audit that we work through. But today, in the interest of time and to keep this useful and focused, we're going to work with 5. So, let's do this together. What I'm going to do is I'm going to name each of the 5 dimensions that we're going to speak to. And as I say each one, I want you to rate it on a scale of 1 to 5. A 5 means it's strong. And it might even be the reason why you stay. A 3 means it's okay. Not great, but not terrible. And a 1 means it's a real problem, something that drains you or holds you back. So as you're hearing these, don't overthink it. Trust your gut. You already know the answer. So for the first one, growth and development. Is your work stretching you? Are you building capabilities that will matter for your future? So rate your organization 1 through 5. Next one, recognition and visibility. Does credit land accurately? Is your work visible to the people who shape your trajectory? Rate it. Next one, leadership quality. Does your manager give you clear direction and then autonomy? Do they advocate for you? Rate it. Next one, compensation fairness. Is your pay keeping pace with your contributions and the market, especially as responsibilities increase? Rate it. So, the last one that we're going to talk about today, opportunity and path forward. Does a clear path to advancement exist? Do conversations about what's next actually happen? Rate it. Okay, so now you've got your 5 ratings. But before we go further, one thing I absolutely want to flag. It is so easy to let compensation dominate the picture. I get it. It's so important, but especially heading into a conversation where it might come up. What I have seen over and over is if someone gets a disappointing number, then suddenly everything else about the organization that's good disappears. The growth, the good manager, the interesting work, gone behind that one data point. And on the opposite, which often doesn't happen as frequently, is that if the number is good, you're excited about it. But then you might overlook the real problems that you have at the organization. You might be stagnant, invisible, reporting to someone who doesn't develop you. But you think the paycheck is solid, so I'm not going to ask these hard questions. So compensation matters. I'm not diminishing it, but it's one decision and one dimension, and it's not the only one. So let's go back to your ratings. As you look at them, see the full picture. Like we said, don't let comp overshadow what's working, and don't let it mask what it isn't. So as you're looking at those ratings, the number on the piece of paper, the first thing I'd like to ask you to do is star what dimensions matter most to you right now. Pick 2 or 3. And these are the ones that matter to you, not what you think should matter or what somebody told you should matter. It's what matters to you at this stage of your career and at this time in your life. So the second is not only is how my organization scoring on those dimensions, but what are some of the stories I can tell about that rating? So if you gave it a 5, tell me why it's a 5. Write it down, memorialize it. If it's a 1, write it down. Because when you come back to it later, which we will, you'll be able to know, was that a point in time or is this a bigger issue? So the key here is that you're not looking for a perfect job. No role scores high on every dimension. I wish it did, but they don't. What you're really evaluating is whether your organization is scoring well on the dimensions that matter most to you. Because if it is, protect that, appreciate it, don't take it for granted. If it's scoring low on something that matters, now you know where to focus. That can become a conversation with your manager, maybe even HR. It's a request you can make, a problem you can solve. And if your organization is scoring low on multiple dimensions that matter most, and you've tried to address them and they're not moving, that's important information to know too. So, what I want to ask you is that if anything surprised you, feel free to drop a note in the chat. We're going to come back to these ratings at the end of our conversation. So, knowing what matters to you and how your organization is performing on those dimensions, that is a foundation of influencing up, because you can't advocate for yourself if you don't know what you're advocating for. So, now we're going to talk about the self-assessment. I'm going to be sarcastic for a moment and just naming it. Everybody loves the self-assessment. No, I haven't met anyone who enjoys doing their self-assessment. But here's the thing. This is your opportunity to remind your manager what you accomplished over the course of the entire year, and to do it clearly, accurately, and intentionally. So if you've been in your career for a while, you have probably written more than a few self-assessments. So some of what I'm about to share may feel familiar. But I will tell you, this is what my coach tells me. Common knowledge is not common practice. So even if you've heard this before and you know it, use this as a refresher, a reminder to slow down and be intentional rather than rushing through something that deserves your full attention. Because here's what I see. It's often the most experienced professionals who fall into the shortcuts. They've done this so many times that they move quickly through it. And quickly often becomes vagueness and lack of specificity and lack of clarity. So let's take a look at this with a set of fresh eyes. So when I led teams, what I found was that the self-assessment was one of the most valuable inputs I received during review season. It showed me not just what folks did, but it helped me understand their contributions, what they believed mattered most, and how they saw their role in the bigger picture. Some folks refreshed my memory with specifics I had genuinely forgotten. It's a long year. Others left me filling in gaps with my own recollections, which unfortunately weren't always complete. So let me be clear about what the self-assessment is actually for. It reminds your manager of what you accomplished throughout the year, not just the last few months. It demonstrates self-awareness, showing that you understand your contributions. It gives your manager material to work with when they write your review and advocate for you, especially in calibration meetings, and we'll talk about that in a few minutes. And the self-assessment signals where you're headed. So your manager is reading this, HR is reading this. They're forming impressions, not just about what you did, but about what drives you and where you want to go. If you don't tell that story, someone else is going to tell it for you, and likely with less information. So here's another thing I need you to hear. This is not the time to be a shrinking violet and downplay your contributions. The self-assessment is your opportunity to be confident, clear, and accurate about your work. False modesty, it doesn't serve you. It actually makes your manager's job harder and leaves them guessing about your impact. Confidence is not arrogance. It's accuracy. And the self-assessment, it's not a confession. It's a case. So let me walk through some of the most common issues I've seen, both from my years as a leader as well as the work in coaching that I'm doing now. So one of the things that I see is if you're rushed or unclear. So, and this happens to so many people, especially if you're doing your self-assessment at the end of the year. You wait until the deadline and you cram it in. You move quickly through something that deserves more thought. And when you do that, the result is often disorganized. It might be vague. It might be short, staccato-like, just putting phrases in there. So if your self-assessment feels rushed, it's harder for your manager to engage it thoughtfully. So another thing that I see is if you're minimizing your role. And when you say things like, I just helped out, or I contributed, or I was part of the team, again, I don't know where you are in that phrase. So it makes it harder for the manager to advocate for you. And if you led the work, say so. If you drove the outcome, claim it clearly. And the third one is being too general. So seeing things like I worked hard or I contributed to the team's success. Again, that doesn't tell me what you did, what you're proud of, the work that you accomplished. And it doesn't give your manager much to work with. Specifics make your impact visible, and specifics makes advocacy possible. So how do you frame accomplishments without overselling? So here's what you do. You connect three things. You connect what you did, why it mattered to the organization, and what it built for you. So this isn't about listing every single task you've done. You are connecting your work to value, both for the business and for your own development. So, for example, instead of saying this, I managed several cross-functional initiatives this year. Not very specific. It is saying what you did. But what if you said, I led several cross-functional initiatives this year that improved execution across teams and strengthened my ability to influence without authority? You're not hoping your manager figures out why it mattered. You're making the connection explicit. Use a blend of I and we appropriately. There were times where I saw reviews that only had I, and sometimes reviews that I only saw we. When you led the work independently, use I. When you contribute to team efforts, use we. Acknowledge it was a team, but specify your role. So language in your self-assessments that really helps are action words like led, delivered, achieved, created, implemented, designed. That's action. It says what you did. Language to avoid are things like helped with, was involved with. When you kind of quiet what your involvement is, it's hard to see you in that picture. So now what if you had gaps in performance during the year? Because we're all human, that happens. Frame those as development areas, not failures. Acknowledge the gap, explain what you learned, and describe what you're doing about. So it's taking ownership. So for example, instead of saying, I missed the Q3 deadline and it caused problems for the team, which is very factual, instead say, the Q3 timeline was more aggressive than I anticipated. I've since improved my estimation process by building in buffer time and flagging risks earlier. So again, same reality, different signal. And finally, Remember this about your self assessment: it is not just backward looking, it's also an opportunity to signal where you're heading. So, decisions for the current cycle may already be in motion, but perception for next year is being shaped right now. So, it's important in your self assessment that you signal what's energizing you, what you want to build, where you're ready to stretch. This isn't asking for something in the moment. It's making sure the right people know what motivates you. So when opportunities come up, your name is in that conversation. When you tell your story with confidence and connect your work to value, you're influencing up. You're not waiting for your manager to figure it out. You're making it clear. So, next one, which is interesting. This is understanding your manager's lens. So I want to shift the perspective a bit, because understanding what your manager is navigating, it might completely change how you experience this process. Here's the key thing: your review isn't entirely about you. And I know this sounds so strange. It's your review, your name's on it. It affects your compensation, your trajectory, and how you feel about your work. But when you look at it from your manager's perspective, your review is likely one of many. They're navigating the same conversation with every person on their team and balancing decisions with broader constraints. Outcomes are shaped by company performance, budgets, competing priorities. Leaders have to make trade-offs, and sometimes between strong performers, and sometimes within limits that you don't fully get to see. And that's where calibration comes in. So, not all companies do this, but many do. And that's where they have calibration conversations, and they'll have a lot of names to it. But this is where leaders and HR compare performance across teams. They align ratings and allocate what are likely limited resources. Your manager may advocate for you and still not get the outcome either of you had hoped for. That doesn't mean your work wasn't valued. It means decisions were made within those real constraints. So, next thing is always an elephant in the room. I want to clear up a misconception about ratings. Many people think of ratings like grades in school. Exceeds expectations feels like an A. Meets expectations feels like a C, kind of average, mediocre. And you may have been told this many times, but that's not often how it works. Meeting expectations in a challenging role is an accomplishment. If your goals stretched you and required growth, then meeting them means you delivered at a high level. That's not average, that's success. But rating cultures absolutely vary. Some organizations have ratings inflation. Some managers are tough evaluators. A meets expectations from a demanding evaluator may reflect stronger performance than an exceeds from an easy one. So, one more thing: your manager is human, and humans often struggle with direct conflict. That means feedback isn't always as clear as it should be. Leaders often soften difficult messages. They don't like seeing you unhappy, and so they may avoid uncomfortable specifics. And if something feels vague or unclear, it probably is. Why am I telling you this? This is not so you can excuse disappointing outcomes, but so you can navigate with clarity instead of caution and confusion. When you understand the constraints, the calibration process, and your manager's human tendencies, you can show up differently. You can ask better questions. You can take things less personally. And that's exactly what we're going to cover next. So, let's talk about the conversation itself. So, you've done your alignment audit, you have done your self assessment, you've thought about your manager's perspective. Let's talk about your review conversation itself. So, this conversation carries weight. You're about to hear how someone else perceives your work, your contributions, your value. That is vulnerable territory. It is absolutely normal to feel anxious, and even people who had strong years feel uncertainty walking in. And I have to tell you, after 3 decades in leadership, I still felt nervous walking into these conversations. Acknowledge that. You're human. This matters to you. The goal isn't to eliminate the emotional weight, it's to navigate it skillfully while honoring it. So, most people walk in kind of bracing themselves. Their shoulders are up, they're tense, or they might be hoping for reassurance. They're reactive before the conversation even starts. You can approach it differently. See this as a working conversation, not a verdict. And that starts before you walk in. So here's what I want you to remember. Your breath is your anchor. If you walk in tense or guarded, your nervous system is leading, not your judgment. So right before you walk in, take a slow breath in through your nose for a count of 4. Pause at the top of that breath, and then exhale slowly through your mouth for a count of 6. Do that 2 or 3 times. That longer exhale signals safety to your nervous system. It gives you access to clearer thinking. And during the conversation, if you feel yourself getting activated, your heart rate is increasing, your chest is tightening, kind of your mind is going blank, come back to your breath. That's your anchor. It creates space between what you're hearing and how you respond. And in that space, you can choose. Now, as feedback is shared, and this is hard, resist the urge to jump in, especially to correct, explain, or justify. Instead, listen for themes. What are they emphasizing? What are they not saying? What feels vague? Remember, feedback, again, that it's data. It's data. It's information for you. And receive it that way as information to evaluate, not as the final word on your worth. And this is where curiosity becomes your greatest skill here. Questions that open the dialogue with your manager. Can you help me understand what led to that assessment? What would success look like going forward? What would I need to demonstrate to be considered for the next level? And if your manager responds to something vague like that, or with respect, my mouth is not working right now, but if your manager says something vague, like you're doing great, but then doesn't follow up with a conversation about growth or next steps, that's when you can ask what would I need to show to be positioned differently? If they say something like you're not ready yet, ask what specifically would ready look like? Clear criteria gives you something to work toward. And if they can't articulate it, the message might be about something other than your readiness. Now, how you ask matters just as much, if not more, than what you ask. So the same words asked with genuine curiosity and open body language land completely differently than when you have tension and crossed arms. And what I do know is that these kind of questions backfire pretty much 100% of the time, is when you jump in and say, but I did X, Y, and Z. That's defending before you understand, before you've got an understanding. Or I've had someone say, that's not fair because, and they told me why, that puts your manager on the defensive. And the difference between curiosity and defensiveness, it lives in your body as much as your words. Think about what your face is sharing. And if the outcome isn't what you hope for, pause, take a beat. You don't need to agree or push back immediately. It is perfectly fine to say, I'd like to take some time to think about that and come back to you with questions. That's not being disengaged, that's composure. And when you do want to share your perspective, acknowledge first. Say something like, I appreciate you sharing that. And then ask for specifics. Can you give me an example? Then you can share your view. My experience was different. Can I share how I saw it? So those 3 steps slow down your reaction so that you're responding. And the goal here is understanding, not winning the argument. So, toward the end of your conversation, make sure you're shifting the focus forward. Things like, based on what you shared, what would you want to see from me over the next 6 to 12 months? What would make you confident advocating for me next cycle? You're not demanding something now, you're planting a flag. And when the review goes well, be gracious. You did the work. Of course you did. You worked hard, but you didn't do it alone. Your manager advocated for you, your teammates collaborated, colleagues supported you. A strong year is never a solo act. Saying something like, thank you, I know a lot of people contributed to this and I appreciate the support. That gratitude goes a long way for future conversations. So, after the meeting, whether it went well or not as well as you expected, process the emotions privately. Have conversations about the meeting with someone outside of work, whether it's your partner, your spouse, a friend. Don't have these conversations with your colleague, especially if you're feeling triggered. Document what was discussed and send a summary email of what you understood the conversation to be. Don't make decisions in the heat of the moment. Give yourself a beat, maybe even a week. One conversation doesn't define your career. It's one data point. What defines your career is what you do with it. So when you're showing up grounded, asking questions with curiosity, setting the stage for next year, this is influencing up in real time. You're shaping the conversation. You're just not receiving it. So after you've had this conversation with your manager, I want to bring you back to where we started. So when you remember the alignment audit, the question of how is the organization performing for you? Whatever happened in your year-end conversation, as I said, it's one data point. Information about your standing, your trajectory, and the alignment, or maybe gap, between what you hoped for and what you received. The real question is, what do you do with that information? So first thing, give yourself time to process. I'll say it one more time. Do not make major decisions in the heat of the moment. If the conversation went well, enjoy it. If it disappointed you, let the emotional charge settle before you evaluate anything. Then, after a few days, maybe a week, come back to your alignment audit. So earlier you rated your organization across 5 dimensions. After you've had the conversation, ask yourself, did anything shift? Maybe the conversation confirmed what you already knew. Maybe you learned something new about your growth, your visibility, or your path forward. Update your ratings if needed. This alignment assessment, it's living, it's breathing, it's not a one-time exercise. And then return to the core question. How is my organization scoring on the dimensions that matter most to me? If it's scoring well, protect that, appreciate it. Don't let one disappointing element overshadow what's working. If it's scoring low on something that matters most, now you have clarity, and clarity is power. And here's the key. This isn't just a reflection. This is fuel for the next year. So everything that we talked about today, the self-assessment, understanding your manager's lens, navigating the review conversation, sets you up for December or whatever your year end is, but it also sets you up for what you're starting in January and your next year. The alignment audit tells you where to focus your energy. And if growth matters most, that becomes an early year conversation about stretch and development. If visibility matters, it becomes a strategy for how and when your work is communicated. And if a path forward matters, that becomes a clear conversation about trajectory and criteria. So you're not waiting until next year's review to advocate for yourself. You're building it into how you operate all year long. And this is self advocacy grounded in clarity. You know what matters to you, and you know how your organization is performing on those dimensions. You have language to address gaps, not with the vague frustration, but with specific, thoughtful asks your manager can actually respond to. And so, one final thing here, context still matters. Your organization is navigating market pressures, budgets, leadership shifts, and strategic change. Influencing up doesn't mean ignoring that context. It means taking it into account. You hold what matters to you and understand what the organization is navigating. You raise issues strategically. You distinguish between gaps that are fixable and structural ones that aren't. When you do that, you become someone who's easy to invest in, someone who advocates for themselves and understands the bigger picture. That's influence. And that's how you shape not just your review, but your career. So I want to leave you with this. What we talked about today isn't about winning a single review conversation. It's about how you operate. It's about knowing what matters to you, understanding the system that you're operating in, communicating your value with clarity, showing up grounded when the stakes are high, and advocating for yourself in a way that's strategic, not reactive. Again, that's influencing up. And when you do this consistently, not just in December, but throughout the year, you stop feeling at the mercy of the process. You start shaping it. So now if you're sitting there thinking, I want to show up in 2026 with more influence, more presence, and more intentional leadership, there are a few ways that we can support you. The first one is a strategy session. This is a 60-minute private coaching session with either David or me. You choose. This is real coaching, not a sales call. We look at what's in front of you right now, your role, your goals, your challenges, and what you want next, and help you get clear on where to focus and how to move forward. And I'll say this plainly, if something in today's conversation resonated with you, this is the fastest way to turn insight into action. Don't wait. And finally, regardless of what you choose, take what you learned today and practice it. Use the alignment audit. Communicate your value clearly. Ask better questions. Stay grounded in what matters most. And watch what changes when you stop waiting for influence and start practicing it. It's been an honor to spend this time with you. Thank you for being here, and I hope you have a wonderful holiday season and a very happy new year.